Okay, it looks like it's showing it's showing it's live now, so we are good to go.
Okay, thank you much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the November 30th Airport Commission meeting. I'll start with a roll call.
Munson.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Sorry.
Here, Kevin Munson's here.
Yep. Brian Hamilton.
Here.
David Schwartz. David Schwartz.
I see him. Oh, your mute is on, Dave. He's muted.
Okay. I see and acknowledge his presence on the meeting. Chair Lorman.
Here.
Mr. Young has indicated he would be absent tonight. Mr. Shaw is joining as we speak, so he'll be here in 1 second.
Okay. David, can you hear us? I wonder if he's having audio problems.
Brian Shaw, we're taking a roll call, so just if you could indicate that you're present.
And Brian's having some.
I am present. Sorry about that. I'm working on it.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Yep.
And that's all the members that I see in the meeting room or in the waiting room. So.
Okay, and Alder Jackson is not here, and Jack Young is not here. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Have we done our posting?
Yes. Yep, correct.
Thank you very much.
We have.
And I've reviewed the minutes, and as far as I'm concerned, I have no additions or comments unless there's commission members have some comments or additions to the minutes. Nope.
From October.
Yep.
Yep. Just a correction on there that I was absent for the October meeting.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay. Chair report. Just some minor updates. Got some data from our local EAA group. There's been we've had 8 scholarships, race scholars pass through the airport. And these are scholarships that award a private pilot certificate training program, about $10,000 each. So that's about $80,000. Locally, Jade Hofeld was recognized nationally, National Business Aviation Association, as an achievement for of the year. UL 94 UL 100 continues to really progress quite well, and there's been some recent news releases that have really looked quite favorable in terms of we basically now have both sides of the industry and certification kind of coming together, the STC side, as well as the Piston Aviation Fuel Initiative paths. And, more developers out there doing testing and developing. So it's all quite encouraging to see that. And that's about all I have. And Rich, you're next.
Yep. And okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. Is this good?
Sounds good. Looks good.
Okay. We'll get into going through the neighborhood relations on the October and then the November manager's report. From the 1st through the 25th, 6 individuals, 15 reports. 1 individual made 6. Again, the city's site, direct emailing the city via phone or by email to my business account. Responded to all of those who wished a response. No violations of FAA regulations were apparent in the reports. Everyone that requested a follow-up was contacted. Again, safety, no accidents or incidents on the field. In November, mowing was winding down, and the patchwork on the runway was scheduled for November 1st. Kids in Aviation Club, we had 6 kids participate with their parents, flying the simulators under the instruction of volunteers. Several retired airline captains, a couple CFIs were involved with that. And we hosted a safety seminar on October 26th, winter operations. I presented that. And our final safety seminar will be December 12th. I'll be presenting that as well. And on aircraft systems. Any questions about that report?
No, Rich, I wanted to thank you for putting together the UL 94 information on what the status and current projected usage is. So thank you much for doing that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm afraid he kind of got it a little goofed on, and I'll try to write a letter to the editor correcting it. Not that it makes a lot of difference, but yeah, he seems to have a confusion between 94 and 100 low lead. Other than that, he just sent a bunch of questions out. I answered them and sent them back. So,
yeah, well, thank you for doing that. Basically, projected what, about 1,000 gallons of UL 94 consumption projected a month.
Yes, that's my guess. That's my best guess. I hope it'll work its way up. But at the moment, that seems to be about where we're going to go. That we only had the 1 month of operations actually, and before the engine had an issue that we shut us down for a bit. So we've got fuel again. We're going to be when we're selling it and using it in our trainers, a couple of our trainers. So we will see how the consumption actually goes with it this year, this month.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. As for, also, I'm afraid on this, on your print, I had the first one, I guess it should have been October 1st through October 25th, not November. Second one, October 31st through November 28th, 2023. Only 3 individuals made 4 overflight or noise reports. Basically all the same information, really quite a bit less. No accidents or incidents. Patchwork was completed on November 20th because they couldn't do it on the 1st because of weather delays. Our AWOS, Automated Weather Observation System transmitter, is out of service. Now, the transmitter itself is out of service, been for about a month now. The system is still providing weather online. You can dial in and get it. So the information is out there. The state, they're anticipating another month before they can swap it out. I'm not sure if we're just going to get a new transmitter or if they're going to jump us to the head of the line and we'll get the first of the new AWOS systems that will be going in. I believe it's the latter, but I'm not positive about that. Again, runway and taxiway crack seal is needed. Next summer is the target, and I believe the cost on that is projected at about $90,000. I'm not sure precisely what the city share of that will be, but I believe it's certainly eligible for as a project as it was last time. And the Kids in Aviation Club took a field trip to the United Airlines Operations Center in O'Hare. Again, about 6 kids. About as many parents and then some chaperones. It was apparently just a great event. Very, very good all the way around. And then again, December 12th, last safety seminar. And that pretty much covers what's going on out here.
Thank you. Okay. And you'll be getting ready for some snow.
Yes, we are. We've already plowed a little bit.
All right. Okay, it looks like next on our agenda is financial reviews. I can simply add my comments. Brian can fill in any gaps here. my assessment is our expenses are up. Clearly, there was more outlay in terms of supplies, materials, and then of course there's the capital outlay for the truck. So comparing last year to this year, as we are heading into November, right now we're really where we were at last year. So I don't think there's any surprises there. And Brian, you might be able to just fill in some thoughts on the supplies and materials. And
Yeah, no surprises from the finance department standpoint. This is kind of, where they anticipated we'd be at this year, with equipment, and particularly with the newer equipment, with the 94 UL truck being an older vehicle. We knew that there was going to be some maintenance involved in that. So nothing out of the ordinary that was completely unexpected. So we'll continue to monitor things as the months go on, and keep this spreadsheet updated with costs as we receive them.
okay. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping back just to Rich real quick. There was a question about a charter line install. I don't know if that's okay to bring it up here, or it's just more of a status update.
Oh, I believe it's going forward without any real issues, and we're also getting a fiber optic, I believe, running into the facility here, the terminal, and I believe that will be available at all the hangars if they wish it.
Okay, thanks. All right. That should, does anybody in the commission have any question regarding the financial status to Brian or myself? Okay. Moving on to the airport zoning discussion. Brian, you
Oh,
can,
sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just have somebody
Yeah.
make a motion to accept the financial report.
okay. All right. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the finances as presented. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, Brian and Dave. All those in favor of the finances as presented, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Brian, you'll pull up the airport zoning and start off with an introduction. I appreciate the fact that Mark Opitz is here as well to start providing some background.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just give some high level overview and then turn things over to Mark Opitz, our zoning administrator and city planner, who's been kind of taking the lead on this overall city zoning ordinance update, and kind of walk you through some of the things that we're thinking about, and any questions or comments or commentary you want to provide to both the Plan Commission and City Council as they begin the process of kind of wrapping up their full review of the zoning ordinance for the city as a whole. One of the things that Mark will touch on, previously in his memo, he'd mentioned the airport property was guided by a planned unit development or planned project development, PPD. It's kind of a zoning category that each property that has that classification is unique and special. That's all well and good, but over the course of time, as you have more and more properties utilize that special zoning category, it kind of gets a little bit harder to administer from a zoning standpoint. So one of the things that the planning staff and the planning commission were looking at as part of this zoning ordinance update is, are there opportunities for us to move away from that kind of PUD style zoning and create categories that address the issues for those given uses? And so one of those areas that was identified is the airport, the Maury Field property, where it might be ripe to have a new zoning category that addresses the type of land uses that can occur there, given BOA and FAA guidance on the property. And so Mark and the team kind of put together what is shown up here on the screen in terms of a draft. There's been substantial discussion at the Plan Commission level. We've received from public comments from the town of Middleton and town of Springfield, and we've done some rejiggering of things to try to address some of the comments that we received in that public commentary. And then I have shared this draft with BOA staff to get their perspective, and I'll be happy to share that in a moment once Mark's done kind of given his high level commentary on the issue, and then we'll be happy to take any questions or comments that you might have on it. So Mark, if you want to touch on anything I didn't touch on.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. I simply would say that the uh, land use categories that you see under number 2 and number 3 are are terms that are used throughout the zoning ordinance, and so it's simply using terms that came from the template that our consultant Vanderwall and Associates developed and has used in various communities. And so their initial draft of the zoning of this zoning ordinance used that's where the source was from them, and the language for this AIR district came from them. In response to public input, as Brian noted, I've attempted to do some editing, and so that's basically all I have is overview.
So what I'm showing on the screen now is, so the first version that I showed was kind of the version before any feedback or comments. The version that I'm showing now is the attempt to kind of address some of those issues and concerns. A couple of the questions that were raised, and we can talk about this this evening, is what does the BOA require? And secondarily, there's a question about helioport. So I'm just going to give you some feedback from the BOA staff that I received, just so everyone understands what their perspective is. And this is from Hal Davis at BOA. In general, how local community zones the airport is not of significant concern to BOA, FAA, unless the local zoning regulations hinder airport activity and development. Federal grant assurances require the city to make the airport available on reasonable terms and without unjust discrimination to all types, kinds, and classes of aeronautical activities. While federal grant assurances also require airport property to be used exclusively for aeronautic purposes, unless otherwise approved, there are many unique circumstances in which FAA might approve non-aeronautical uses. The example he mentions is the solar field that exists on the property. Because of these obligations, we don't know what the future might hold, and to maintain maximum flexibility, I recommend limiting restrictions on the specific land uses and percentages. For example, depending on the circumstances, an office or restaurant on the airport could be a violation of federal grant assurances or acceptable at any percentage of building size. Similarly, recreational facilities are often considered incompatible land uses on airports, but there are exceptions. An alternative approach would be to require all land uses to be depicted on the current FAA-approved airport layout plan. Any proposed development or land use changes on the airport are required to be depicted on the ALP. The FAA's review of the ALP's change process is generally used to determine if a proposed land use is acceptable. So if a development or a land use is shown on an approved ALP, it should be acceptable. Finally, I'll mention that the term heliport typically refers to a standalone facility used by helicopters. UW Hospital has a helioport. An airport may have a discrete piece of pavement dedicated to helicopter use called a helipad, which is specific design, marking, lighting, and airspace protection standards akin to a runway. Of course, helicopters can use runways, aprons, and other areas to operate as well. Most airports don't have a dedicated helipad, but some do. It makes sense to have helioport as a conditional use in several different zoning districts. However, just as you don't have to list runway as a permitted use in the AIR, it is probably unnecessary to list heliopad, and at least as far as the BOA and FAA are concerned, a facility is either an airport or a heliopad, never both. So that was the commentary we got back from the BOA.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Well, Mark, any more input on this?
No, I don't have anything else to add. We're other than we held a public hearing on November 14th, I think it was, and we are in the final stages of editing the ordinance at the planning commission level. I anticipate them making a recommendation at their December 12th meeting.
Okay.
For council consideration in January.
Okay. I guess I'm of the, based on the BOA's response, I mean, the whole discussion or surrounding heliport doesn't really seem like it's more of a problem for development actually outside the airport than it would be within the airport space. And I guess I just open it up now for commission comments and feedback to Mark and Brian regarding, we can start with that point. If there are any.
I have a comment. I can't find the raise your hand thing here. All of a sudden the screen changed on me.
Go ahead,
So
Kevin.
yeah, so I noticed that the BOA mentioned Article 19 of our grant assurances when they mentioned that we can't apply constraints or restrictions to the development of the airport that's outside that's in, if you look further in the grant assurances, the outside that's defined in the advisory circulars and all of that. So I know that there was a request in there not to have a heliport and a few other things. And all I'm saying is that we still need to be consistent with the advisory circulars, how airports are developed. And I don't think that you can allow for just overall constraints to one use or another use if it's not consistent with the guidances in the advisory circulars for airport development, management, build out, and whatnot. So I know that the Bureau of Aeronautics did mention, I think, yeah, it was Article 19. There's also some mention in 28 and 34 to provide more guidance on those grant assurances. But we're still obligated to, whether we call it a heliport or an airport or we have a pad, we can't make just general statements that say, no, we don't want that sort of activity here or there if it's outside of the advisory circular best practices, if you will.
So then I guess the question would be, say something changed within the configuration of the airport and we said, oh, gee, we need to put in a square of pavement and put some markings and some lighting on it and say this is a helicopter operation area. And now in the city ordinance, it essentially applies stating that there is no heliport. So are we, and this I guess would be a question for Larry, how would you interpret that?
I mean, I think the guidance we're getting from the BOA is that it's not required one way or the other to list helioport as a permitted use in the zoning ordinance, because to Member Munson's point, it is required under the circular and the grant assurances in BOA and FAA regulations. So I think the point that Mr. Davis was making in his commentary on the ordinance is that it whether you list it or don't, it's still a permitted use in the zoning district.
Sure. Okay.
And I would add something that I think I forgot to put in my memo. I just realized. Airport is defined in the land use regulations section, Article 3. I don't know if I'm just skimming my memo quickly to see if I have it. I don't think I have it in there. It's very general terminology. I can actually read it to you very quickly here. I just need to open my ordinance. Here it is. Actually, what I could do, if you'd like, Brian, is I could share it. It's very. I mean, it's very. Here, I'll just tell you what it is. So it's an area used. It's on page 140 of. Well, the page numbers might be slightly shifted, but it's under the transportation land use section 10.03.18. It simply says airport, an area used for the landing and takeoff of aircraft and any appurtenant areas which are used for airport buildings or other airport facilities or rights of way, together with all airport buildings and related air transportation buildings per, and then it cites state statute. So that's the definition of an airport. And then it just has three regulations listed. Letter A is airport shall conform to the regulations of Chapter 31 of the City of Middleton Municipal Code, which is not being changed by this ordinance. It's been in place for a couple decades. Letter B, all new construction of any airport land use shall meet the requirements of industrial land use design standards. And those design standards are specified in a new section of our zoning ordinance. And then letter C is minimum required parking, minimum maximum required parking per, and that cites the section pertaining to that. So very minimal set of regulations. And of course, it links airports to the definition in the state statute.
Okay, great.
So helicopters are theoretically, permitted under state statute.
Sure. And I guess as far as the city is concerned, then from ordinances outside airport operations, you're okay potentially restricting or not allowing the development of heliport, say on a future hospital or healthcare facility or
Yeah,
something like that.
if we ever have that request, as most of you may not know, but the city actually approved a planned development district a number of years ago to allow a medical facility at the southeast corner of Century Avenue and Highway 12, the Beltline. Whether that will ever move forward remains to be seen, but that type of use commonly has a heliport, although in that case, it's lined up with the runway. So obviously there needs to be, just like there is now, and Rich will attest to this, aircraft and helicopters flying in the vicinity of C-29 communicate with each other. It happens all the time. It has to happen for safety. And so if that land use ever were to be introduced anywhere in the city, I would imagine then we would want to add the heliport as a land use, permitted land use, and restore that in our zoning ordinance. But at this point, based on guidance from the Planning Commission, we took references out to heliport throughout the code.
Okay. Any other discussion along heliport?
Chair Lorman, Mr. Schwartz has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Sure. I just want to, just for clarification, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. What I'm hearing is that helicopter operations and even the concept of heliport is within, even though it may not be stated in the ordinance, is within the allowable uses of the airport as it exists and as it will be in the proposed new ordinance. Am I correct about that?
That's my understanding, and what Brian has been finding as well.
Okay. And the reason I asked that question is because in the town of Middleton's communications that started this whole thing, that induced the city to start to take out that language about heliport, the town of Middleton is very clear in their letter that they state a heliport should not be allowed. Doesn't say the designation in the ordinance of heliport shouldn't be allowed. It says a heliport shouldn't be allowed. So I just, from my perspective, in light of the fact that it is an allowed use of an airport at the airport, I would, my position would be to leave that word in and as an allowable use for the simple reason that for clarity, because if we have someone in the community, in this case, the town of Middleton, who is saying they don't want a heliport, I think it's important to make it clear that that in fact is clear and unambiguous, that in fact that is an allowable use within the basic regulations of an airport under the grants and the FAA. For that reason, I would leave the word in. From everything in this discussion, that doesn't change what the use is. It just clarifies and takes out any ambiguity of someone saying, hey, we don't want a heliport.
And as David Schwartz articulated, that kind of is what keeps bringing me back to, this discussion as he so articulated. And so really, the question is now, I think, what, Larry, how would you weigh in on this?
Well, I don't have a working knowledge of the FAA's role in this particular question. I would assume that their role is always paramount. And I can't tell you off the top of my head whether the FAA has a specific position on heliports in the first place. And that makes it very difficult for me to answer the question. I would say, however, that if the ordinance were silent on heliports and it formally included heliports, it would lead to the argument, if only the local ordinance was considered, that that must have been a decision by the Common Council to ban heliports by normal construction of laws. I'm not saying that's the right answer, because again, I think the FAA has paramount authority here. But in the absence of the FAA, that's what my opinion would be.
If I may add to that, Larry, I think, what we did what the Plan Commission recommended is not only removing the word heliport from all the zoning classifications, but to strike the definition altogether from the land use section. I think another way what Larry is saying is, had we kept the word heliport defined in the code and then not assign that land use to the airport, that would cause a greater concern for me, because then that creates that sort of creates that implied decision by the council that, oh, well, we don't want a heliport here. But as Brian said at the outset, you can't have something designated by the FAA. It said both an airport and a heliport. Isn't that what you said, Brian? So I'm not troubled by leaving the word heliport in the ordinance and having it listed in the zoning ordinance. I don't think we're really, I don't know that in and of itself is any sort of violation. I also don't, based on what Brian has found from the BOA, I don't see any harm in taking it out, and as long as the word isn't found anywhere in the ordinance. And obviously helicopters have been using the airport, they use the airport, and they can continue to use the airport pursuant to all FAA regulations. So I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other, except if we were to define heliport and list it in certain areas but not at the airport, I think I would be concerned about that because of inconsistency.
Yeah, let me just respond on that very briefly. As Mark knows, the standard rules for construing ordinances are that any use that's not listed as a permitted or conditional use in a particular zone is a prohibited use.
Right.
And that's what leads to the problem here. Now, again, with FAA's rule, I just want to point that out. So this is a significant decision you'd be making.
Well, one thought I had was to add to the definition of airport that I read earlier, was to add the word helicopters are allowed at airports. That would be another way to handle that. In fact, that might make Larry a little more comfortable. But that's what I'll say.
David Schwartz had his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, I agree with what Larry is saying, and that's exactly the concern that I had. If you leave the word out, there's an ambiguity there. And so someone's, can take whatever action they want to take, objecting to use by helicopters, potentially. If you leave the word in, then you have gone a long way. You never go all the way, but you've gone a long way in eliminating the ambiguity of usage. And since, again, we seem all to be in agreement that helicopters are allowed and appropriate, then why not go as far as we can go to eliminate ambiguity? And that would be leaving the word heliport in.
And and what helped me kind of form my thought about it was going all the way back to the United States Code, Chapter 471, 49, where it gives definitions of all the all these applications and uses of the aviation environment, which as a heliport. So would it be fair for us then as a commission to advise language back, I guess, to the Plan Commission and Common Council to simply say the absence is potentially creating confusion in the language? Well, how would we like to frame that? Because that's what they want to hear from the Airport Commission. They want some guidance from us. So if we can craft something that is digestible by them, I think that would be appropriate.
Just so you can see, so this is the language that was in the original draft of the code, as we all just discussed. And then another way to handle this, I suppose, could be this. I don't know, Larry, if that I hadn't thought of that until just now, but we could add that. Are all helicopters considered aircraft? I think the answer to that is yes.
Yep.
So this could be another way to handle it, or you could restore this language as you're describing. I don't really care either way, whatever Larry and the commission are guiding us.
So prior to this zoning ordinance, this draft zoning ordinance, if somebody wanted to put a heliport in the city in Middleton, what would we have done? I guess is the question.
Based on what Larry said, that would not have been since that's not explicitly allowed anywhere listed in any of our zoning districts, that would have been problematic. As zoning administrator, I would have found that problematic. But we allow it at the airport, obviously, because it's considered an aircraft. And under current zoning, the airport is owned plan development district. So that's a whole nother discussion that one can have is whether to even assign the AIR zoning district to the airport altogether. But that's a separate question.
And clearly, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
can just supplement this. The language for defining airport on the screen you're looking at is taken from a definition in chapter 114, which is 114.002 subsection 7. And it just says the same language you got there. Any area used for the landing and takeoff of aircraft. Okay, there's more, but those words are directly based on the statute. So then what is the question? The question is, what is an aircraft? That term is defined as well. And this is subsection 3. Aircraft means any contrivance invented, used, or designed for navigation of or flight in the air, but does not include spacecraft. So we're not going to have Cape Canaveral, but the definition in the statute, and again, I wasn't aware of it until I just looked at it, would seem to be broad enough to include helicopters. But I still think that the issue of expressly taking it out is a potential problem.
Okay. Brian Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Norman. I would concur with perhaps clarifying that definition of, what the state had there as far as any type of aircraft. We could say powered or non-powered, because otherwise we could be. I'm sorry.
They say contrivance. Any contrivance.
Sure. Including helicopters, would maybe use the term rotorcraft instead of helicopters. So there are other variants of a helicopter, like a gyrocopter. If we really, just trying to keep it general to all sorts of aircraft, powered, non-powered, if you want to include non-powered. Otherwise we're going to end up, I think, are we going to have to list every type of aircraft that's out there? So I like the definition of, what the state had, the contrivance of all aircraft. Just a thought. So.
Mm-hmm. So really the advice we're getting right now is having the lack of heliport is potentially opening up a problem for down the road. But then once you add that, the term heliport back into this, then Mark, you have to start, dropping all this, the actual, you listed it there, the setbacks and all the build out and development requirements. Clearly, building a heliport within the airport just for the sake of discussion, would obviously be far enough away from all residents and various types of things, because that already is incumbent on the design of the airport. So,
I mean, the advantage of keeping it in the ordinance or restoring it to the ordinance, aside from the reason that Larry cited, the advantage is, we don't have to identify this in any zoning classification besides the airport at this point.
Sure.
But then it's available if we ever felt that one of our zoning districts needed to have it added, then we have to do minimal updates to our zoning code.
okay. Okay, so again, I think let's come up with some.
David, sorry,
Go ahead.
Mr. Shaw has his hand up.
Brian Shaw, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think why don't we just cite back to the Wisconsin statute that defines aircraft instead of muddying the waters and having to list out separate craft, right? I mean, it's there, the definition's there. If we look at the purity of what the definition is, that answers all of our questions. I'm not sure that we need to confound the definition by adding in our own words when the legislature's already done that for us. So my recommendation is to not change it, but maybe cite back to section 3 or subsection 3, whatever Larry was referencing.
Well, I might suggest right after the comma, after aircraft, as defined in WSStat section 114.001, subsection 3.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Is that the right citation? Did I hear you right?
Yes.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense.
So I think, I guess, Brian, this will be for you to present when the time is appropriate, the rationale for adding the language back in, and I think we just have to be prepared to articulate that back to the Common Council or Plan Commission. That we got advice now from our city attorney, and the Airport Commission that the absence of the language could potentially be problematic.
Okay. And so again, just so I'm clear, so the suggestion or the commentary from the commission is one, to add this red language here, referencing back to Wisconsin statutes about what the definition of aircraft are, and then 2, for clarity purposes, to leave the helioport item and regulations in the AIR district.
Correct.
Okay.
Is this something we should vote on, or we're just being really an advisory here, I think.
Yeah, no, I don't think you need to vote on it. No.
Okay, great. Any further discussion on heliporting as opposed to transporting? Thank you, Mark. Try to keep up with you, but I can't.
Well, you're getting there.
Yeah. The other piece of this, Brian, if you want to go back to the draft zone. I lost my pen here. Sorry.
I have it here.
We get into the percentages of building usage. And that's just one of the fundamental things I wanted to bring up for discussion. The term office is quite nebulous. And I think we have to be careful in just, throwing a random number in there. But I think what would be much better is to have language that really cites out the intent of an office being used to support, again, an airport and its primary function. For example, office space is currently used right now for flight school, hosting a flight simulator, debriefing room, things like that. Oh, and also there's a community room at our FBL that is used, for larger classroom space and those types of things. So, looking for some thoughts and input on that, and if the BOA or anybody else had to weigh in on those areas.
If I may elaborate, Chair Lorman. So, and actually, I very much appreciate that you said the word office is nebulous, because that got me to pull up the zoning ordinance. Here's the definition of office. And what I discovered is that we had already added a sentence which now contradicts or conflicts with the last minute edit after receiving the town's second letter. So, so again, these terms out, in this case, office, and then you see the one below, these are just standard land use categories that come from our consultant. This is how office is defined. We decided to add as a regulation that within an air zoning district, you can't, the use shall not be more than 50% of the gross floor area of any hangar, terminal, and other airport-related structure. But that now conflicts with what I had put in your packet, so I had forgotten. As you can imagine, this has been a tedious process, and as we're tinkering with it, it's I have to be careful that we're, not having unintended consequences. My personal preference would be not to have any percentage at all. That would certainly be the easiest, and just use the cat, because none of our other zoning classifications, if you look at all of our other zoning classifications in the city, they don't have any modifiers in that section. Oops, sorry, this isn't. Well, just take my word for it.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is the only section now, because of the public input we received, where we put modifiers in the section. I would personally rather just not have it at all.
Right, and I agree. So, if you're comfortable changing that and confident it can be articulated again to the Plan Commission and or Common Council, great. Let's take it out of there.
Larry wants to comment.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't looked at them in probably at least 10 years, so I'm not going to pretend I have them memorized. But I thought somewhere within the airport documents, perhaps in the minimum standards, or perhaps in some of our older leases, we actually specified what land uses were permissible in a hangar. And it seemed to me that the primary focus was the sentence just above the list, which is all of which shall be aviation related and directly pertain to operations. So, I'm looking at office, and now I'm being a devil's advocate. I don't know how much bigger a hangar is than most airplanes that are in the hangars, but 25% as a layperson seems like a pretty large number. Even if it's directly related to the to aviation related activities, I wonder if that's just providing more to the hangar land lessees than they think they have right now. And it strikes me that it's a potential concern. So yeah, I guess I'm saying maybe you've got our form lease.
Yeah, that's the one on our website, which I don't know if we've ever updated it to make the minor changes from last time. I don't maintain our website in this area anymore.
Well, aeronautical facility use. What does that say? 5B.
Yeah, I would say it's under 5. I would say it's under there too.
Yeah.
This sort of thing has not changed in our lease documents.
Yeah, actually 5A is more important.
Right. I can make it a little larger. Another approach that we had discussed is simply to say uses as allowed by the leases, but again, that's not terminology that we find in our zoning code typically. So I would rather keep it. I would rather keep the zoning code as simple as possible since it's already plenty long.
Does the zoning code call out hangars specifically or no? I didn't think it does. And that's
no,
what that's what's
uses,
interesting.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it doesn't, and that's what's kind of interesting.
What it refers to in the air district. Link to it. I think it's up here. Agriculture. Sorry about scrolling. Where is there? So it lists airport, office, indoor maintenance service. We did put a disclaimer. That is another bit of language that did come from our consultant to just clarify. Yeah, it doesn't specifically say aircraft storage, but that's implied in an airport's going to have planes out there. So,
Yeah, so it's kind of confused. I just think then, yeah, it's confusing.
I mean, if you want this, to me, this is leaving it as it was, provides the most flexibility. We all know that we can't allow uses at the airport that violate our grant assurances and terms of leases at the airport. So, if I had if it were back to the original language, minus some of the uses that the two towns objected to, which we have no objection to removing some of the uses that they requested be removed. I think these are, as written with these two deletions, I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Okay. Then
but I take my guidance ultimately from the council that will make that decision.
Right. I mean, I think whatever is delivered to the council, they have to understand the rationale behind it, in how it really fits in with this new zoning redraft. Because if we have language up here that is incompatible with it, that's what it would simply have to tell them that, yeah, we put this in there, but you know what? It's actually incompatible with the way it's written. And that's why we're taking it out. Because if we're going to have an office, well, the office has to be compatible with the use of an airport environment. Right. So we don't need to put more in there than what's already there. So, okay.
And just to reiterate, this is restaurants, taverns, and indoor commercial entertainment seems like a very broad category. That's just the land use category defined in our ordinance. Mm-hmm. So my concern was if we didn't specify some of these things and they found a way at the airport, that would be a way for for somebody to contest the use at the airport outside of the FAA grant assurances and leases and all that. And I just, we just didn't want to create any sort of ambiguity as our attorney has said.
Yeah, and right now in our current permitted uses, it says restaurants class 1, 2, and 3 as an ancillary use to a terminal building, miscellaneous retail stores as an ancillary use to a terminal building, and any other related auxiliary and or accessory facility. So we do allow an ancillary use right now. So what does that mean if someone vacates one of the spaces there right now at the FBO, where in the past, we had a donut shop in there, we had a resale store, and currently we have I think it's an aerial cartography software development firm.
Yeah.
So, so for example, I'm not picking on the business that's there right now, but they actually had an airplane that came in there with survey equipment on the belly of it. Right, Rich?
Yep, it
Yeah.
did. Well, so we have one office that's dedicated to flight medicals to Dr. Sherritt, another office for the Willa Brown organization that's all about flying for, underrepresented populations and kids. So,
Mhm. So, hypothetically, what if we find ourselves in a position as the city where we have vacated space there, and someone hasn't come along and said, well, this looks like it's an aviation related business, but we have someone who's certainly wants to sign a lease to use the space out there. Wouldn't it be advantageous to lease that space out as a revenue generator?
and my position and MADC's position and the city's has always been, this terminal is primarily aviation related, but if we have a surplus office or a surplus space, it can be leased to whatever entity wishes it.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to make sure we don't, again, box ourselves into a corner on that. Anybody have thoughts on that? Okay. I had a question. What are essential services, Mark?
Actually, that term is no longer, you must be looking at an older draft. We had that question come up from other people, so I've removed that definition.
Okay.
In fact, when I do a search on the ordinance, it's no longer there. That was a
Okay.
reference to small scale utilities.
Okay.
So
Thank
I'm actually surprised was that I see, was that in the old ordinance? Yeah.
No, I mean, it was in this new draft ordinance, but I guess it was.
Well, if it's in my memo, okay, let me go back to my memo. If that's, let's see, okay. Yeah, I see what you're asking. So here is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Dave. So because that was confusing to people, some people would say that, a pharmacy is an essential service. We've actually replaced that term essential service with small scale public services and utilities. So that's a nothing burger.
Okay.
I've always wanted to use that word in a meeting. There you go.
Small scale public services. So we're continuing to allow that as a use at the airport, and I guess I just
Right.
don't know what that is still.
Well, it's I can go to the definition for you. It's a utility box. I mean, it's just small scale utilities. I'll find it.
Okay.
So examples would be like the boxing equipment for fiber communications, those type of things.
There's other definitions here too. So here it is. The nice thing about this code is you can easily find things with word searches and oops, where was I? Small.
Okay.
Oops, it just was there. Small scale public. Here we go. Why does it keep jumping around? Huh. It's
Okay.
wait.
There it is.
Yeah, I know, but it's not. I don't understand why it's not. Here we go. All right. When I close the search, then it moves away from it. So let me just close the. There you go.
Okay, so this is like the cable and fiber optic installations and things that would support that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I have no other questions on that. I'm good with that. I just going through my list of everything that I've highlighted in yellow as we should go down the list.
I appreciate your thoroughness. So am I hearing that this is the guidance from the Airport Commission then?
Commissioners, thoughts, please? I don't want to do all the speaking and thinking. Okay.
And then related to this, as we discovered, there was some additional language under the commercial section, and which I found as we were talking. So I am proposing, given what you've been saying here, that under office, that we strike this language, which I was saying 50%.
Yeah.
We're striking that there, and we're striking it under restaurants as well.
Yeah. I guess just looking at it from, just a higher altitude perspective than flying around the area at 2,500 AGL, but more around 30,000, that the draft language really reflect the intent and the spirit and the purpose of aviation use and support and development. And those are my final thoughts.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Maury's got his hand up.
Please, Rich.
Yeah, I have a conflict here. I've got FAA mandatory training for the CFI stuff, so I'm going to have to switch out here. If there's anything, I can monitor this, but probably won't be very active. If there's something that you guys need me for input on, please let me know. But I'm supposed to be in two places at one time, and that's difficult.
Thank you, Rich. Not a problem. I think we've wrapped up the zoning discussion.
Okay.
He doesn't have a twin engine. That's the problem.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Any more discussion on zoning before we move on? Is that Rich? Is that just coming in from the background? I heard something. Okay, moving on. If we're done with this portion of it, then the next section is a presentation on trends in aviation by our commission member, Mr. Munson.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Everyone hear me? Okay.
Good. Sounds good.
Great. So, a quick presentation here. Won't take up too much time. I was thinking about this presentation and after discussion, during our master planning process, the discussions that I had with various people and my neighbors and certain people in the aviation community. And there seemed to be, at the time, I remember giving a presentation at one of these meetings and saying, hey, just a reminder that we all use these airports, whether they're, primary air carrier airports or general aviation reliever airports. And I did get a lot of feedback saying, oh, we don't use the general aviation airports, the reliever airports, because we don't have a plane there. We don't use it. And it really brought to my attention, and even talking to my neighbors, talking to attorneys, talking to doctors, really having discussions with some of our critical thinkers or elected officials, that there really is a lack of understanding of what our airports do, the different type of airports, whether they're GA airports or relievers, or they're primary air carrier airports and what they do. It's easy for us to understand our interstate system and our county roads and our surface roads and how all that fits into the system. It's a little more difficult with our aviation system. And especially since 1978 with deregulation, the emphasis and the importance of the general aviation reliever airports have become more and more critical, as a lot of the services and the activities have been pushed from the major air carrier airports to our general aviation reliever airports. And I saw this because I learned at San Jose International Airport at a fixed-based operation there. And then slowly over the years, they pushed all those activities that weren't critical for getting these airliners up and down. They pushed those off of the airport and pushed those back onto from the air carrier airports to the general aviation reliever airports. So in a nutshell, these are reliever airports like Morey have become more and more critical to just keeping the system going. And there's a lot of issues out there, and the general public has been very demanding and insisting on improving the services, improving the routes, improving the airfares, and all of that. And that's pushed a lot of the critical activities back on our general aviation reliever airports. So but back in 1978, there was a big push for deregulating the airline industry, and that wasn't deregulating how pilots are trained or how they design airplanes, but mostly for deregulating the number of routes, the entry of airlines into the system, the fee structure, and all of that. So the masses, so it could become more affordable to the general public and the masses. So it's not just business people or wealthy people, but everybody having equal opportunity to fly on the airline. The problem is, if we could go on to the next slide, let's see, can we move to the next slide? Hello?
Brian's controlling the slides.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be on the second slide.
Okay, the next slide then.
It's not.
Number 2, I guess.
So this is 1. This is what's shown as 2.
Oh, I still see the same one up there.
Yeah.
Or-
Brian's gonna reset it.
Yeah.
Screen sharing.
Yeah, Brian, it doesn't look like it's moving.
Okay, there we go.
Perfect.
So the subject matter experts out there said, well, we could turn this into a mass transit system, but there's going to be safety, and there'll be safety issues, quality of services. We'll see bankruptcies. I mean, there was a big push not to do this because it just wasn't scalable the same way the train system is, or the bus system, or cars getting on the freeway system. And the main thing is there's just lack of space, the infrastructure. Where are we going to, we're going to scale this up and to increase the number of people traveling by 200%, 300, 400, or 500%. How are we going to do this? How are we going to qualify employees, the mechanics, and all of this? And of course, increased carbon footprint. They even talked about that 40 or 50 years ago. But we, some of, the spread of disease. Okay. That wasn't such a big deal back then, but we certainly understand how the air transportation system becoming a mass transit system would certainly spread disease faster. But one thing that in addition to this huge expansion that was predicted, they would be able to expand the primary airports, but they would also have to move as many activities as possible to general aviation reliever airports. And so that's where we're seeing more and more of a demand on these airports that a lot of people feel that are just recreational airports, but are really not. They're general aviation. They're the reliever airports. And they've taken over, some of the charter operations, most of the flight training operations, and also mechanic operations and training, and all of this to allow the air carrier airports to operate in a very efficient manner. People just don't like when flights are canceled or they're late. Okay, so next slide here. There we go. So if we look in the mid 60s, there were approximately 100 million people that traveled a year. By the mid 70s, that had slightly increased a little bit to 150 million. Post deregulation, that jumped almost 300% to 400 million. And today, we're looking at about 1.1 billion travelers a year. And that doesn't include all the cargo that's coming through with Amazon and all of this. So today, we're seeing 10 times as many people fly in the US as in the 60s. Now, here's what's really interesting. Basically have the same number of public airports. Since in the 80s, we have about 200 less public airports that we had today. So it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on our general aviation airports to relieve some of this demand. At the same time, the government is putting a lot of money into our primary air carrier airports. You're seeing that in Chicago, and some of the bigger airports are expanding. Even Dane County Airport is put on, I believe, a new terminal extension to help mitigate some of this incredible demand. Okay, the next slide. So we have, it's 16 million flights handled a year by the FAA. I mean, it's a big system. 16 million flights that are handled every year. That's both air carrier and general aviation, and I'm guessing military. And the next slide. That's 45,000 flights a day. So it's I just got back. I just traveled from the East Coast, and that's why I have a cold. I traveled and got a flu or something. I traveling, but anyway, every one of my flights, and there were 6 different flights I were on. All of them were booked 100% except one of the flights. So there's the demand is there. Okay, the next slide. 10 million plus scheduled passenger flights yearly. It's just huge. It's just incredible the growth in the air transportation system. And again, it's important to note that this doesn't include all the cargo that we're seeing as a result of online ordering and Amazon and all of that. So, okay, the next slide. At any one time, to give you an idea, there's 5,400 aircraft in the skies over the United States, which is just unbelievable that there's just that many aircraft in the sky in the air at one time. And I think during 9/11, when we stopped all air transportation for I think 2 days. It made a remarkable difference in the quality of the air, because you didn't have all these planes up in the sky flying at one time, burning all that fuel. Anyway, next slide. So this is what's important. There's 19,633 airports, but only 5,082 public airports. Now in 1980, prior to deregulation, there were 5,200. So we're really looking at there's 100 less public airports today than there were, and we've seen a 400% increase in air travel. Imagine, living in Middleton, and the population increases by 400%, but we have less homes. I mean, that's really what we're dealing with, and why we're seeing so many activities at these airports that support the primary air carrier airports. Okay, the next slide. 14,000 air traffic controllers. I mean, this is huge. This system is just huge. And this is just in the United States. I'm not talking worldwide. I'm just talking about the FAA and the system that we have to support the air transportation system in the United States. Okay, the next slide. I think I'm almost done here, folks. So 167,000 fixed wing general aviation aircraft. That's opposed to rotary wing that we just talked about. So we classify aircraft basically into 2 different types of aircraft: fixed wing, which is your typical airplanes, and then rotary wing, anything that's like a helicopter, a gyrocopter, or something like that. So we have 167,000 fixed wing general aviation aircraft currently in the inventory in the United States. Okay, next slide, please. Here's where we're really with the freight. And this freight comes into all airports. It's not just our primarily air carrier airports, but into general aviation reliever airports and other general aviation airports, where we're looking at almost 45 billion pounds of freight a year carried by aircraft. It's a long way from the days of the airmail services back in the 1920s. 44 billion pounds of freight per year. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the last slide. So what we've seen a 10x increase in passengers since 1960. That doesn't include cargo. Many of the activities at the air carrier airports have been moved to reliever airports, especially training, and that's to keep these airlines going, keep the schedules going, minimize delays. This deregulation was mandated by the public. This is what the public wanted. The public, the general public, they've insisted on this. They insist on it today, and there's currently a significant pilot shortage, which general aviation is trying to do the best it can do to eliminate that. With an estimated 50% increase in air travel over the next decade, the system will require more operations at all airports, especially general aviation or reliever airports. So, I think that it's important, if we don't get anything else out of this presentation, that, when people ask, what is the purpose of Maury Airport and airports like that? And it's really to serve everybody and to work to support the national air transportation system, especially as it grows. It's not as scalable as some other forms of transportation, but I think everyone's doing the best that they can do. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Does anybody have any questions or follow-up comments for Kevin?
Okay, Brian.
It's not a question. It's just really confirmation of what Kevin was saying, is that, you had mentioned that you have neighbors that say, well, we don't use the airport. Well, indirectly, when we talk about pilot shortages, a lot of these pilots start their training at general aviation airports, and without that, you're going to continue to have pilot shortages. Also, the A&Ps that get started, they usually start out at general aviation airports, and then eventually will, hopefully, if their goal is to get hired by the airlines, and that's what they do. So it's pretty important, Maury included does do that. And believe it or not, I've seen the UPS aircraft land at Maury several times. So we also do cargo at Maury Airport. So just kind of some comments to support, what Kevin was saying. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And really do appreciate that. Okay, the next item is the discussion and potential action on public comment procedure. Brian, you can bring that piece up.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Give me 1 second. Where we had left things is that at our last meeting, the members had kind of one question for the city attorney, and I haven't really had a chance to talk with him much about it. But for the most part, you were comfortable with these procedures. You just had a question as to whether or not, whether the body or the chair had the ability to stop public comment if needed. I think was the question that was remaining from last time.
And was Larry going to add some input on that, or we're?
Well, yeah. I actually had separately commented that putting a 15-minute limit overall is probably, if you have one person who shows up and talks for 3 minutes, that's great. If you got 20 people and you are the 6th person who can't speak at all because of the 15-minute limit, I'm troubled by that. And from my experience with public comment, I'm not terribly concerned with being firm with 3 minutes, because it's just about universal now. Many public bodies work with those limits and work well with them. In terms of just cutting it off completely, I mean, I guess I sort of answered that on the 15-minute discussion. But, you know, although I doubt that there would ever be, excuse me, litigation over a so-called arbitrary time limit at a meeting. At the same time, you have a lot of other business you need to take care of. And you don't have to do public comment at all if you don't want to. So, you know, my sense is, and again, obviously I haven't been going to airport commission meetings, and I know in the past you've had a lot of public comment. That's the one I am most concerned with. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'm not sure if it doesn't create extremely bad relations with citizens who are concerned about your activities.
Okay, I agree. It's don't want to have more tension created. I think maybe what it boils down to is at the commission's discretion, we open things back up then to public comment. We allow as much time. If there's 10 people, there's 10 people. If there's one, there's one, and we allow them to all comment.
3 minutes.
Yep, for 3 minutes. And I guess at some point, if the commission thinks for a particular reason or not, we're not going to just simply have any public comment at a particular meeting based on an agenda or whatever, and we have the discretion to do that, then that's what we would do. I mean, we
Well,
would
there's one more option, and I mentioned this to Brian as well. That is to schedule public comment routinely, but not always. So maybe you have it once per quarter or every other month. It's entirely within your discretion. Saying you're going to do public comment doesn't say you have to do it every time. And
Okay.
particularly when you've got a heavy agenda, I think people will understand if they are denied the right to speak at that particular meeting, as long as you've informed them in advance that this is not going to be a meeting at which public comment will be allowed. But, you know, as long as you have it, and again, that's your choice, I think you have a lot of control over the manner in which you implement it.
Okay. Commission, any thoughts on, then we would strike the limited to no more than 15 minutes. That would just simply be strucken, removed. Otherwise, it would be fine as is, and moving forward, we would open up our meetings to public comment and see how it goes. If at some point down the road, we felt we can establish a threshold and say we'll take comment on a quarterly basis. It's just as long as we're consistent.
Mr. Chair, I see Alder Jackson with his hand up, and then Mr. Schwartz. Alder Jackson, if you could just turn your camera on when you're speaking.
Yes, my only question was about the cutoff. Would it be optional that if a person is doing a public speaking and they become disrespectful towards the commission or hostile, that we would be able to cut them off?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thanks.
That's Robert's rules, actually, so it's quite permissible.
David Schwartz.
Sure. I just want to comment that, David, your suggestion of taking out the 15-minute total, if you're going to do that, do we want to put in some language that as we were speaking of earlier, that allows you the discretion given any circumstances of a particular meeting, to cut it off, whether that be at 15 minutes or at any other point in time, but just leave language in there that you have that discretion.
I
Well,
think,
that's an option.
go ahead.
Again, the way I would suggest you do it to avoid people being disappointed at the meeting is if you've got a lengthy agenda, just put in your agenda at the beginning. No public comment at this meeting due to press of additional business to be processed at this meeting, or something like that. So no one comes to the meeting expecting to comment, and then they're told, sorry, it's too late. I think that's a better way to do it. And again, there's nothing wrong with just only having it when it's appropriate. I mean, the other alternative here, just thinking this through, if you had a major issue coming up, and it wasn't necessarily something for which a vote was going to be taken at that meeting by the airport commission, but you still wanted to hear from the public about it, you could just schedule a public hearing on that specific topic. And I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying you could. And then you take the gloves off. They can talk for as long as they want to. I think we limit at the council at public hearings 3 minutes as well. But the point is, it's a way to occasionally, if there's a need, open it up for the public without necessarily doing it all the time.
Alder Jackson, your hand is up? Or is it just stuck? Maybe it's stuck.
I believe it's stuck because I put it down.
Okay. Following on what Larry said, so a good example is the Plan Commission did have a meeting last month, and that was the intent of the meeting. So the meeting was the meeting format was started out to say the meeting is for a public comment open session, and and they were addressing a fairly hot topic, and there was quite a bit of comment, and then based on that, you amend your, obviously prior to the meeting, we amend the agenda. So we say we're going to have a public comment agenda meeting, and it's just to really address one thing. Nothing else is on our agenda. We don't have to even go through finances and airport manager report and so on and so forth. And that might be that would be probably quite useful then. Mark?
So just to provide quick context, I think it needs to be emphasized, and I'm sorry I didn't hear everything that was said, but I want to emphasize that when we have gotten public comment in the past, oftentimes it has been regarding items not directly on the agenda, and that has then led to commission, the members of the commission commenting, or staff commenting, or airport manager, what have you. And that is what triggered the concern from our city administrator at the time, in consultation with the city attorney, Larry, that's where we were potentially running afoul of the open meetings law by addressing topics that hadn't been noticed on the agenda. So I don't know, Larry, if you would emphasize that, but I wanted to reiterate that point, that is where there has to be caution to not get into open meetings violations.
Well, that's absolutely right. The purpose, I don't want to beat this to death, but the Attorney General has concluded that public comment is okay so long as it is intentionally open for people to talk about anything that's on their minds. If it's an item on the agenda, it really is more appropriately handled during the discussion of that item. But it's been pointed out that the open meetings law does permit response to the points raised by public comment, but not to vote. And frankly, I think that can be, this is why the Attorney General raised this issue, because if a number of people bring in a major item and using their 3 minutes for a total of a half an hour, persuade the airport commissioner or any other governmental body of their position, and then at some later meeting it's on the agenda, but everybody's already been persuaded by what happened in the public comment, that's a problem. It means that the general public didn't have notice of the fact that something was going to be discussed extensively at a meeting, which can happen and has happened. I'm not picking on you. I mean, it happens everywhere. So, I'm going to give you another option. This would really be a citywide policy, and this is what the Attorney General encouraged when this issue was discussed some years ago. That is, if someone knows they're going to go to a meeting and speak on a public comment, they should be required to notify the city of that fact, and then that item can be added to the agenda of that meeting, and so everybody knows it's being discussed. So people who might have an opposing viewpoint see, oh, they're going to talk about that. I guess I need to attend that meeting, rather than getting only one side of an argument being presented. Now, I realize there will always be people who make public comment and they do it kind of at the last minute. And that's understandable. You can't amend an agenda willy-nilly. We can amend it in less than 24 hours, but no more than 2 hours before the meeting. But we don't want to be doing that regularly. But I think if you widely publicized a policy, that if people really want to talk about a big issue, they should notify the city clerk or the city administrator and ask that item be added to the agenda, and that they will prepare public comment on that topic. Well, then you don't have anybody unhappy, because then nothing can happen at that meeting that people on the other side could complain, and probably do complain, hey, we never knew you were doing this. So that's one way of dealing with that.
So Alder Jackson's hand up again, or am I just seeing things?
No, what's up?
Okay.
So, and that last suggestion that Larry made, I definitely agree with that, because my thing is I understand the public comments and everything else like that, and they're open to ask questions that's not on the agenda. But I think we should be informed in advance, because we don't want to lose ground of the agenda if you got a bunch of people that are asking questions that had nothing to do with the agenda, and now we're stuck answering and going back and forth and beating a horse and never making it to the agenda.
David Schwartz. Oh, you're muted, Dave. You were unmuted.
Looking at the item that is on the share screen, the fourth bullet point, I think, covers this issue, that we are not supposed to respond to remarks or questions that the speakers make. So I don't think that part of it's necessarily going to bog down the agenda.
Well, my standard advice has been that if someone has a major issue, it is in order and not a violation of the open meetings law for someone to move to refer that matter to whatever committee has jurisdiction of it, so that it will be processed formally by a committee in the future. that's perfectly okay. The issue becomes more difficult where you don't just say, thank you very much for your comments and move on to the next agenda item. The more you talk about it with those people who are making their point, the more possibility that, sorry, that someone can complain that the matter has been prematurely decided without their involvement.
Sure, and I agree with that. And the again, the fourth bullet point seems to cover that, indicating that follow-up will be provided at a later date as necessary. And so I think we're at that point advising everybody that that's what's happening, or I would hope that was what the intent is.
Alder Jackson, your hand is up? Or just not down? Nope, it's up.
Yes. So so Larry, help me to understand, and and that's how I read the fourth bullet point too. But help me to understand if you're saying it correctly, even though what the fourth bullet point says, we still have to indulge in or even answer the question or even refer it to another committee if that person decides to bring up something.
Or if it's an airport matter, you refer it to a future airport commission meeting. Yeah, I mean,
but we still have to respond.
Well, the idea of responding by saying thank you very much, and that happens at common council meetings all the time, that's the only response. Thank you very much for your comment. But I'm acknowledging that the open meetings law does allow discussion on a matter raised in public comment. I don't like that position because I think it's dangerous, but I have to acknowledge that it exists.
And I agree with you. That's why I asked that question, because I believe, yeah, that's dangerous. That's treading some waters you might not want to tread.
So I think maybe the question, Larry, is just for the sake of discussion, say our airport agenda is like it is tonight. It's just a discussion about zoning and it's all set. But we have a public comment section and people keep showing up. A whole bunch of people show up and they say, why isn't the grass cut along the fence, right? All these people are saying this and we're like, okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now the question is, okay, are we obligated to say, well, okay, that'll just be on a future agenda?
Well, I don't think you're obligated, but it's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously and right then and there, we couldn't say to them, for example, say we knew all the machinery was broken down. Say, well, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you, citizen so-and-so. The reason it isn't done is the machinery is broken down. And I wouldn't, I can't do that as the commissioner, just to say, we hear you, we're taking care of it.
I think you could say something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Kind of well, never mind.
Yeah. Okay. I think without the airport commission asking the city to change a significant portion of its rules regarding public comment, then we'll move ahead accepting this as is, if the commission is okay with that.
Just point of information, Mr. Chair, was it accepting it as is with striking the 15-minute time limit and adding language that the chair has discretion to end public comment if necessary? Is that?
Yeah.
That's what I thought I had written down before.
Yeah, and also, and I don't think we have to add language to it, but we know that the chair can, at future dates, simply determine that we're not going to take any public comment, at future meetings, for example. So I don't think we have to add language where we already have a permissible policy. As Alder Jackson's hand is up.
No, not this time, sir.
Okay. Do we want a vote on the commission or no? This is just, again, a recommendation back to the Common Council, Brian.
I mean, this would be a policy for this body, not It's not a policy for the Common Council. So,
Okay.
you know, I think if you wanted to make it effective for this body, it would be appropriate to vote on it.
Okay, so then I'll state it this way. Based on city attorney's advice, we're going to change the language. We're going to remove the 15-minute time limit and state in there additional language that would be it would be the chair's discretion based on an agenda to simply shorten public comment period or not. But that would be in advance of the meeting, obviously. So it requires some forethought and planning on the commissioner's part, on the commission's part as well. So do I have a second on that?
Yeah, second.
Okay. Any further discussion at this point? Or we? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much. Okay. Next is future agenda items. The only thing I really had, and I mentioned this to Brian in a previous email, do we need to talk about crack sealing? The email seemed kind of technical that Rich got in. There were some options and some dollar amounts thrown out there. So maybe we should discuss that in January or
Yeah, yep. We'll have some more information from our consultant on that, hopefully before our January meeting. So we'll have that on as an agenda item.
Okay, thank you. And really the only thing that kind of was in the back of my mind was, you know, do we want to look at any other future work as a body on information to put on the city website? You know, we did a nice job with the noise, kind of the noise FAQ. It's there, it's good. And did we want to do anything in that direction regarding the future, you know, regarding the EPA and unleaded fuel? And just a city statement. Just, you know, that's all it would be. It would be something, do we want to discuss that in the future or not make any more busy work for the city website people?
Okay. I'll add that to the next meeting as well.
Okay. I don't want to make work, but I think we should discuss it. Okay. Next on the list would be we will convene into a closed session. And for this, do we do a roll call?
We do, yes.
Okay. So, Brian, do you want to do that?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hamilton.
Here.
Mr. Shaw.
Here.
Alder Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Schwartz.
Here.
Mr. Lorman.
Here.
Okay. We will convene into closed session. 1 second.